Hello, everyone.
Hello, Zainab.
Aberk, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
I'd like to talk about the psychology of being burned out.
Yes.
I have 3 questions for you again. If you'd like, let's get started.
Uh-huh.
What is the difference between mental burnout and ordinary fatigue?
Are you asking about physical fatigue?
Mentally.
Yes. Well, there's no difference. By the way, even with physical fatigue, neurologically, there really isn't much difference. Because even though our brain has a complex structure, in situations of pain or when we feel burned out or tired, whether it's physical or mental, it doesn't matter. Same areas are activated. Similarly, when you experience physical pain, when you fall or get injured, the same area in your brain is activated. There isn't much of a difference neuropsychologically. Sometimes I notice this in myself. Here, the days are really very busy. On days when I have 6 or 7 sessions, I feel physically tired. Yet, I work sitting down. What I need is focus, active listening, and analytical reasoning. But even so, I still feel physically tired.
What are the first signs that someone who feels burned out might notice in themselves?
Let me explain this first. Well, someone who feels burned out primarily feels tired anyway. They also feel mentally exhausted. Their reasoning ability becomes impaired because, again, from a neuropsychological perspective, the brain's anxiety level has increased. In fact, it's a situation quite similar to overthinking. We've exhausted ourselves, which is actually a condition that emerges after excessive thinking. Burnout. We've put too much pressure on ourselves and feel mentally drained. We have difficulty making decisions. This is the first symptom. Our anxiety level increases even more because of our habits. Because if we've always learned to cope with problems and anxiety in this way, it only increases our anxiety levels even more.
So, physically, for example, if we think too much, that also leads to stress, anxiety, and so on. As a result, can this also lead to physical illnesses?
So, physical illnesses. For example, a single process making us feel exhausted, or a project we're working on making us feel burned out, does not cause physical ailments. But again, studies clearly show that in people who are exposed to long-term ongoing stress and anxiety, or who repeatedly subject themselves to it, blood sugar becomes irregular, and because the amygdala is intensely triggered, it even suppresses the body's natural defense mechanisms, since the amygdala does not feel safe in that situation. So the immune system also weakens. As a result of these studies, it turns out that the risk of developing cancer and diabetes increases significantly.
What can we do when we feel exhausted?
What should we do when we feel exhausted? Well, first of all, our mind is very tired. So in that case, we should first let it rest. For example, I observe this now, and at the same time, I take it as a model. People who have very busy daily routines definitely make an effort to rest their minds. In other words, they include this in their daily routines. Of course, our mind, our psychology, and our body all try to stay in harmony with that. No matter how much we push it, it tries to adapt, but there is a limit to this as well. Balance is very important. When that limit is exceeded, our mind loses its ability to reason, and at that point, it already gives us the message, don't push me any further. So what we need to do when we feel burned out is to distance ourselves a bit from the situation, take a break, pause for a while, and regularly give our mind some rest. This can be effective. For example, many people include this in their daily routine. I mean, people who have intense schedules, they occupy themselves with trivial activities. For example, why do people take up hobbies? People who have very busy lives, who have to make very serious decisions, for instance, go and do sports. And he doesn't contribute anything to his sport. They just exercise. Or they have hobbies. They get involved with things like woodworking, carving, and so on. They listen to music, drink their wine.
So, you need to stay in the moment.
But this isn't really about being able to stay in the moment. You have to give yourself a chance to rest. Only if you give yourself a chance to rest can you build a more sustainable process. It doesn't matter how busy you are, you need to recharge yourself. For example, people don't sleep, right? This is very wrong. I have clients who are preparing for exams. So I ask, what did you do this week? I say, for example, they generally feel burned out. They say things like, well, I watched a series, I played computer games, and so on. And when they say this to me with regret, I tell them, so you worked this week then? No. They say, I didn't work. No, I say, you rest your mind. If you don't let your mind rest, you can't work efficiently. Because you've been following an unsustainable process. That's why you've ended up here so far. Now learn to do the right things and apply this to your whole life. And time management is also very important. Being able to manage your time properly. You need a bit of self-discipline here. Please don't see yourself like this. I can handle everything. I can keep up with everything. If I don't do it, who will? Do we really have to put so much burden on ourselves? We discover our limits as we push ourselves. When we reach and recognize that limit, that's where we need to stop. This isn't procrastination. Procrastination is something entirely different. Mentally, you may be ready to take action, but you don't. Please don't interpret it that way. As we said, it's about time management and a balanced process.
Thank you. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and join us in the comments.
What are the situations where you feel burned out? I'd also like to write personalized responses to you about those in the comments. So let's meet in the comments, please. Because in videos, we have to speak in very general terms to appeal to everyone, but I really enjoy interacting with people.
See you in the next video.
See you.